Hey everyone, ready to dive into another awesome story? Before we start, make sure to hit the like button below and subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss any new content coming your way. And don't forget to comment on what stories you'd like to see here. Let's jump into the story. In the world where this story takes place after 100 years of monster invasions, it became normal to train at hunter academies if you wanted to become a professional monster hunter. Definitely a profession that would be interesting in real life. And that is the dream that the orphan Seojun Kim works tirelessly to achieve. But after a strange accident shattered his hopes, a message from the mysterious Transcendent Academy appears on his phone, offering him a chance to train virtually with the greatest legendary warriors in history. A born and raised Brazilian would already be skeptical about this. As he levels up, he is soon introduced to the world of hunter academies, dungeon incursions, and competitive tournaments. Yet the more he learns, the more questions arise about the people around him, his past, and the secrets of the Transcendent Academy. 100 years ago, the skies cracked open and dungeons emerged. The monsters that came out of them could not be controlled using ordinary weapons. The only hope against them was those who mastered extraordinary abilities. These people were called Awakened. Their heroic deeds brought order to a chaotic world, and as a civilization of monsters and magic emerged, the Awakened who fought against the creatures became known as Hunters. Over the decades, their numbers grew. The awakening mechanism was discovered and artificial awakening became possible. Soon, anyone with enough money could become awakened. Naturally, everyone wanted to be a hunter. This led to the era of the great hunters, kind of like the golden age of physics in the last century. As things became overcrowded, the government created an official testing statute for professional hunters. This statute restricted professional hunts only to those who passed the test. Naturally, places dedicated to preparing candidates for the hunter exam emerged, institutions that trained physical aptitude and knowledge, teaching everything necessary to become a hunter. Private academies stood out from the rest. A man is fighting against a dragon that seems wounded from their duel. The creature asks how a human like him could exist. The man replies that the dragon is nothing more than a big fish in a small tank. The creature tries to attack him with its tail and claws but fails. The man easily dodges all of the dragon's desperate attacks. Then, with a precise strike, he pierces the dragon's head with his spear, defeating it. Seojun Kim, 27 years old, one of the naturally awakened. He was born awakened, so he had always been stronger than those around him. Then, his parents died in a mysterious accident, leaving him full of unanswered questions. He got a job at a towing company and had been there for over 9 years. Only one thing kept him going: hard work, financial stress, and his grand dream of becoming a professional hunter. I totally get you, protagonist. Life is complicated. During a break at work, one of his coworkers asks how his savings for becoming a hunter are going. Seojun replies that things are going well and that he's trying to find a decent and affordable hunter academy. Another coworker, overhearing the conversation, questions the need for an academy, wondering if being awakened isn't enough. The first man, the one who had asked about the academy, explains that hunter exams have been around for 15 years and nowadays, attending a hunter academy was mandatory for everyone. He was right. Most instructors were retired hunters who had spent their entire lives on the front lines to gain the experience they now had. Nowadays, if you wanted to become a hunter, you had to enroll in a hunter academy. Finally, the protagonist had saved up enough money to afford a year at a hunter academy. Man, what an expensive business. As he was browsing the most affordable hunter academies within his budget, a bunch of ads about something called the Transcendent Academy started popping up on his phone. However, the protagonist had never heard of it before. The messages and ads claimed that this academy was simply from another universe, boasting decades of experienced instructors who knew everything. It also offered a personalized curriculum for each student, showcasing several graduates who had successfully passed through the academy. Intrigued by its proposal, the protagonist began researching more about it. The homepage of its website looked like any other hunter academies, but he noticed something strange about the instructors' names. One in particular caught his attention: Monkey King. This instructor addressed his students saying that everyone called him Monkey King, but his real name was Sun Wukong. He claimed that his magical staff was his main weapon and that staff techniques were no different from spear techniques. He then started demonstrating some moves with his staff. The first step: start spinning the staff using only one hand. The second: position the staff in an attack stance and stop spinning it. And the last step: focus all energy on a specific point and strike with full force. The protagonist was astonished as he watched the video, realizing that with just these steps, the instructor had managed to destroy an entire mountain. Not exactly something you see every day. When the instructor did this, it took the protagonist by surprise, as even an S-rank hunter couldn't destroy a mountain so easily. Just then, a message popped up on his phone, asking if he would like to take the course. He clicked the register button, but an error appeared, stating that he wasn't a member and asking if he would like to join. Another message then appeared, indicating that his membership fee was being calculated. The total cost? 40 million won. Coincidentally, this was exactly the amount the protagonist had saved up over the years to enroll in a hunter academy. He decided to set the offer aside for a while. His coworker then asked if he was trying to enter an academy that day and which one he was registering for. The protagonist replied that it was called Arc Hunter Academy and that its instructors were great. The man then told him not to forget his friends when he became famous. Someone once said that life is a comedy from a distance and a tragedy up close. As the protagonist was leaving, he suffered an accident at work. A crane carrying a monster suddenly malfunctioned, dropping the creature right on top of him, leaving him seriously injured. Even in this world, the poor can't catch a break. Kim was now in a hospital, listening to his doctor explain his situation. The nerves in his legs were necrotizing, and his bones seemed to be following the same pattern. He then remembered his boss claiming that this hadn't been a workplace accident and warning that if a single word about it got out, it would ruin his family's reputation. The doctor continued, stating that the surgery would cost 40 million won, and if they waited any longer, both his nerves and bones would necrotize together, making it too late. The protagonist paid for the surgery and realized that over time you start learning to take a step back and just observe life from a distance. For 9 years, he had been saving up, and now all the money he had set aside was spent on an emergency surgery. Just as he was beginning to wonder what he would do next, a series of messages popped up on his phone about the Transcendent Academy, announcing a special discount for new members. The new enrollment fee was now 3 million won. Coincidentally, this was the exact amount of emergency money he had saved. Without much hesitation, he confirmed his registration as a new member. As soon as his phone notified him that his registration was complete, the money he had saved was instantly drained from his account. A message then welcomed him, and suddenly, a tiny humanoid figure emerged from his phone, introducing itself. It greeted him warmly and explained that it was his assigned mentor responsible for guiding him. Its name? Simply Mentor. When the protagonist processed what he had just heard, he asked if its name was Mentor, and its title was also Mentor. The tiny humanoid confirmed, stating that it was indeed the mentor responsible for monitoring him, and from now on, his mentor was, well, Mentor. Kim grew a bit frustrated with how many times the word mentor had been repeated, but soon realized that this was also the name of Odysseus' teacher. The tiny humanoid reacted with surprise, asking if he knew Odysseus. It then mentioned that Odysseus had been its first student, and had already become a transcendent a long time ago. However, he still checked in from time to time. The mentor then explained that the Transcendent Academy pushed people beyond human limits to train them to become transcendents. Curious, the protagonist asked about the difference between a transcendent and a hunter. His mentor simply stated that a transcendent instructor was far beyond an S-rank hunter, then reminded him of the Monkey King's video. A pretty solid argument, to be fair. The mentor then handed him a form required by the academy, a personalized aptitude test. The first question asked him to select the category in which he wanted to transcend. The options included combat, industry, medicine, spirits, arts, and others. The protagonist asked what this was about, and the mentor explained that it was simply a questionnaire to determine what kind of transcendent he would become in the future. It also helped gauge his current level and ensure precise communication. The mentor urged him to answer honestly. The protagonist selected the first option, combat. When he reached the second question, he hesitated. They asked him to choose his current level, with options ranging from someone hesitant about becoming a transcendent to someone capable of easily destroying an entire mountain with a single strike. The mentor chuckled, mentioning that many people got stuck on this question. He told Kim to choose whatever level he felt he was capable of. The tiny humanoid then started making suggestions about his current strength. Can you break things with a thunder kick? Can you shatter a mountain with a single attack? Seeing the protagonist's baffled expression, the mentor asked, "Wait, you can't do any of that." Kim replied, "It'd be pretty weird if I could." Fair point. The mentor then wondered how Kim had even managed to register for the academy in the first place. However, noticing that Kim was starting to get anxious, he reassured him, saying that everything was fine and that there was no need to worry. After all, the Transcendent Academy, they never rejected a member. Once a member, always a member. He then urged Kim to continue filling out the form. By the time he finished, Kim was completely exhausted. He hadn't expected it to have 108 questions. The mentor responded that it was all good since he had a pass ticket, meaning he could now begin the essential courses. He then told Kim to check his profile before they talked again. As he reviewed Kim's profile, the mentor noticed that he preferred a combat style involving a spear. He then pondered whether spear techniques should focus more on magic or tie enhancement. At one point, he even considered the Monkey King as an ideal teacher for the basics, but immediately dismissed the idea. After all, destroying a mountain with such ease was indeed an extremely high-level feat. The mentor then presented the best course options available to Kim, each with different approaches. The tiny humanoid pointed out that Kim's body wasn't in great shape, and the only thing he really had going for him was his mind. Because of this, he suggested a course taught by Siddhartha. Hearing that name, the protagonist immediately associated it with Buddha. The mentor confirmed his guess, adding that even though Siddhartha always denied it, everyone still called him that. Siddhartha was known as the instructor of the mind, and his teachings were a required subject for the Transcendent exam. The mentor then stated that honestly, the course was worth all the money in the world, but since the instructors were always trying to save humanity, they didn't charge what they truly deserved. With that, Kim decided to enroll in the course. As soon as he started the lessons, a man in the video posed a deep philosophical question about the place where the world exists. He argued that words did not exist, and since there were no words, neither did he. There was nothing to compare things to, nothing to define existence itself. At that moment, Kim realized this was exactly the kind of content his mentor had warned him about earlier. After an extremely agonizing mental journey, Kim finally received a notification stating that he had made a 0.06% progress in the course. A massive achievement, as we can see. 1 week later, Kim had fully recovered from his previous injuries, shocking even his doctor. Even though the doctor knew Kim was awakened, he admitted that in his 30 years of experience, he had never seen anything like this before. Kim then thought to himself that his recovery wasn't just in his head. Thanks to the wisdom he was gaining, he had managed to heal much faster. However, despite all that, his course progress had only reached 1.3%. The doctor decided to keep him under observation for another week, and Kim, still wondering what would happen when he reached 100%, agreed. At this moment, the Transcendent Academy had become his true goal. During another lesson, a new instructor appeared, Chiron. He was a centaur, half-man, half-horse, and the legendary teacher of Hercules, Theseus, and Achilles. Many of the most famous heroes of Greek and Roman mythology had learned from him. Chiron introduced himself and explained that the purpose of his course was to prepare every student for their transcendent journey. However, he warned that this course was not focused on combat techniques. Then suddenly, Chiron shouted at Kim, "Stand up and move now." The protagonist, who had been deeply focused, was startled by the centaur's sudden command. The protagonist was now lying on the ground, having collapsed from the shock. Just then, a notification popped up, alerting him that his daily training session had arrived. The system had calculated his routine based on his current physical level, and his daily schedule now consisted of 30 kilometers of running, 1,000 squats, 300 push-ups, 300 sit-ups, a light workout, of course. Not even I could do this daily after a year of training. Seeing the list, Kim immediately questioned whether they really expected him to do this every single day. However, he recalled what his doctor had told him about taking some time to rest, so he decided to skip the session for now and complete it later. But when he tried to do so, a system message appeared, warning him that he could only proceed after completing the list. As he was considering his options, he noticed another message stating that he had only 83 days left until the course ended. Upon seeing this, he immediately started running in desperation, trying to complete his exercise goals. He then started wondering about the time limit. While it made sense for a course to have a set duration, since it was still a business at the end of the day, he questioned why there were 83 days remaining instead of 90, which would have made a full 3 months. He still didn't understand how this strange academy worked. He had no idea how progress was measured, how well he needed to grasp the content, or how to advance properly. Despite repeating the lessons from his first course for an entire week, his progress remained stuck at 1.3%. How was he supposed to complete this course in just 83 days? Kim had never been someone who actively trained since he never needed to. After all, he had spent the past 9 years working at a company that required heavy physical labor. He used to carry the lifeless bodies of monsters, each weighing around 70 kilograms, so it wasn't like he needed to work out beyond that. He still knew nothing about magic, but he was awakened, meaning he could do this. So, with no better option at the moment, he began doing 300 push-ups. After 9 years of hard labor, this was nothing for him. But when he looked at his phone, he saw that the push-up counter was only at 81. That's when he realized he had to do everything way more times than the list required. And worst of all, he had to do it every single day. A few days later, people started noticing the physical changes in Kim. An elderly lady even congratulated him for his dedication. Then, as they watched the news, a report came in stating that at 5 a.m. that morning, a 4-star monster had suddenly appeared in the center of Seoul. The reporter then mentioned that a hunter from an academy had saved the people from the creature. The elderly woman turned to Kim and asked, "Are you a hunter too?" Kim nodded in response. She then smiled and asked, "Will I see you on TV one day as well?" At that moment, a bitter-looking man sitting nearby overheard the conversation and started mocking Kim. "These modern hunters are nothing like the ones from the old days," he scoffed. "You'll never make it." Irritated, Kim shot back, "Mind your own business." The man stood up angrily. "You should learn to respect your elders when they're giving you advice," he snapped. Ignoring him, Kim simply left the area, now even more determined to prove him wrong. Meanwhile, a woman battling monsters suddenly found herself questioning her own path. She no longer wanted to be a hunter. As she fought, she started thinking about the core principles of her own academy and whether they were truly worth anything. She felt as though her academy was just draining money from her, given that she had no students and was hating her current situation. But despite all that, she defeated the monsters in front of her. The protagonist was finally back in his sweet home. He had spent 2 whole weeks in that hospital, which had left the doctors shocked at how quickly he had made a full recovery. The hunter exam was approaching with roughly 1 year left. Kim then checked how much money he had left in his bank account. There was nothing. At the very least, he had completed his daily training session. Just then, a message popped up asking if he wanted to watch the next lesson. In the video, the centaur appeared, stating that after this training, Kim was finally starting to take his first steps like a baby. Then he revealed that the first step to becoming transcendent was to acquire the sense. At that moment, a message popped up showing that his course progress had reached 5.7%. Now we're talking. Finally making some progress. The next morning, Kim was back at his old job. Money was his biggest problem right now. He couldn't eat if he didn't work. But if he worked, he wouldn't have time for lessons, especially the ones with the centaur, since he couldn't progress in the course without completing his daily training. So he decided to review the old lessons. In the video, the centaur explained that the 5 senses were crucial in combat: touch, hearing, taste, smell, sight. When stimulated, these senses evolved together. However, that process was far too slow. To accelerate the process, the centaur suggested avoiding unnecessary gaps in sensory training. He then said he would teach how to reach the bare minimum of that evolution in no time. Not by using the 5 senses, but by awakening something that had been dormant inside him. The 6th sense. Instinct. One more sense, and he'd be a gold saint. Kim's lesson was suddenly interrupted when his coworker entered the room greeting him. But both of them were startled when Kim instinctively dodged his coworker's friendly pat on the back. It was an unnatural reaction. His coworker then jokingly asked if he had grown eyes on the back of his head. Kim himself didn't even know how he had done that, but he was just as shocked as his coworker. Taking advantage of the moment, Kim asked for permission to carry 3 monsters instead of just 1. His coworker hesitated. "Are you sure? That's over 200 kilograms of weight." Kim nodded confidently. Then, without hesitation, he hoisted the monster corpses onto his back as if they were a regular backpack. Everyone in the company stood frozen in shock. Kim took this opportunity to train while working. This time, however, his workout gains were multiplied. A single squat with that weight on his back counted as 3 in the system. Seeing this advantage, Kim started taking the loads that his coworkers were carrying and incorporating them into his daily exercises. Once again, everyone around him was left speechless at his sheer strength. After all, for a scrawny guy like him, this was seriously bizarre. The next day, Kim started noticing that his body wasn't fully prepared for his new training method. Still, he had completed his daily training goal. Yet despite all his effort, his course progress had only reached 10% and Buddha's course was at 2.5%. Not wanting to waste his time, Kim decided to try another course. The regular courses cost a lot of money, so he needed to find a free one. That's when he found a course on raw strength, taught by instructor Shang Yu. This man was known as the Conqueror, a mythical figure from a famous historical text. He was renowned for his supernatural strength, and according to an ancient proverb, he had defeated countless enemies alone. This course seemed like a good option, and above all, it was free. The protagonist then registers for the classes. The figure appears in the video, asking if he wanted to learn how to use a spear and starts laughing, saying that most people who wanted to take this course were nothing but useless trash. But even so, he would teach what he knew. Then he tells his students to spin the spears so many times that they feel it as part of their body and one of their senses. The system then sends a message to Kim, saying that his daily training had already been calculated according to his current level. So his daily training would be to spin any spear 5,000 times. His potential must be really high, huh? A B-rank hunter, Suyin Park, was at the company where the protagonist worked. Upon arriving, the manager tells her that this was a very careful place where there had never been any kind of accident, and that she had nothing to worry about. She then tells him to remember the recent accident that happened with his employees, and she had researched the place before coming there. The workers present begin to whisper among themselves that she was the granddaughter of a legendary hunter called the Sword Star. The Sword Star, Minchul Park minus 100 years ago, he was one of the first humans to awaken. At that time, no one yet understood what it meant to be awakened. The monsters were much more aggressive and dominated the city's streets. Humanity's survival was at stake. However, this particular hunter was one of those responsible for bringing civilization back to the comfort they had before. The savior of humanity, a true hero. Despite everything, after all these years, he was probably much older now, but he was still one of the best in the world. The protagonist then gets excited about her presence and starts doing his daily training. She notices and asks the manager what he was doing. The manager responds that he had already been doing this for over a week. She didn't need to worry about him. Kim goes to get more monster corpses to increase his training, and his friend asks how much longer he intends to keep doing that. He replies that he had a purpose for it and returns to his training. However, while he was heading to another area, a monster corpse suddenly comes back to life despite being severely wounded and goes straight for his friend. The hunter was finally free. She commented that the worst thing there was the manager nagging her and wondered if this was really the life she had chosen. The workers nearby started whispering about her. One of them told the others to shut up, saying that she could probably hear them. But the other worker continued, arguing that from that distance it was impossible, and questioning what a high-rank hunter like her was doing there. She almost called his company a dump. Everyone spoke her grandfather's name with great reverence and respect, but for her it felt like something was choking her by the throat. Her grandfather had started training her before she could even walk. The Sword Star name was a weight their family had to carry, and she never had the talent to bear it. All she ever wanted in life was to be a teacher, but her grandfather insisted that, as the granddaughter of a renowned hero, she had to follow his legacy and wouldn't have a normal life. She thought opening a hunter academy would be a good idea, but every student that came left as soon as they realized that it wasn't her grandfather teaching. They only went there because of his name, not for her. After the failure of her hunter academy, the only thing she wished for was to find the right student for her. That's when the manager appeared, telling her to run away because a monster had appeared. Doesn't make much sense for her to run since she's a high-rank hunter, but okay. When the protagonist notices the monster's presence in that place, he sees that his coworker is stunned before the creature. While his friend tells him to run away so he won't get hurt, the protagonist starts analyzing everything he knows about this monster species. And when he realizes that no one would be able to help his coworker due to the lack of time, he gathers his courage, grabs a metal bar, and steps in front of his colleague to defend him from the creature. Even with his friend insisting that he should flee, he stands his ground before the creature, determined to take it down. When Park arrives at the scene where the monster was, she is shocked and questions what was happening there. She sees that the protagonist, a worker at this company who wasn't a hunter, had defeated the beast with nothing but a metal bar. The protagonist then walks past her and goes to check if his friend is okay. Once he confirms it, all of his coworkers begin hugging him in gratitude. That's when the hunter says that she had finally found the right student for her. As the protagonist heads home, he starts wondering whether the strength he had gained to defeat the monster was the result of his training from the courses. And now he truly believed that experience was the best teacher. Things seemed to show that progress was much faster if he applied what he learned from the courses in real life. The problem was that he needed to be enrolled in a hunter academy to get a temporary license to enter the dungeons. Unfortunately, Transcendent Academy didn't count. He then says out loud that he should just save money to enter a real one. That's when he is interrupted by the hunter from earlier, who asks if she could talk to him. She asks if he would like to meet her grandfather. He replies no. She thought she had heard a confirmation and was about to speak when she stopped, realizing that he had actually refused, and she runs after him. This woman is really persistent. This hunter is 31 years old, and in all these years, no one had ever talked to her like that. The protagonist then proceeds to ask if she wanted him to enter her hunter academy that only existed because of her name and had no students at all. She starts questioning what kind of person he was, doing completely bizarre exercises and managing to defeat a monster that would give trouble to a normal hunter with just a metal bar. It definitely seemed like he was interested in becoming a hunter. She then starts to appeal, saying that they had everything in the academy, yet he still refused. She makes one last attempt, saying that her grandfather would teach him the art of the sword. Yet he refuses again, an opportunity that even professional hunters would easily accept. The hunter asks about the written tests he would have to take, and he responds that he would handle that on his own. The hunter starts questioning him about dungeon missions, claiming that it seemed like he was already in action and ready. She asks if he was already registered, and if not, that he was wasting a lot of time. He then explains that temporary certificates could only be approved by hunter academies recognized by the government. She tells him that her academy was government approved and that she would find a way to get him into one of these missions as soon as possible. When she realizes that he is avoiding the subject, she comes to an agreement with him. She states that since he didn't need an instructor, she would leave him alone with just space to train and would never ask him for any money. This last part catches his attention and he turns around, asking if this would be an affiliation and what she wanted in return. She replies that until the professional hunter exam, he would participate in all activities under her academy's name, and wherever he went, he would tell people that he was her student. It seemed like a really good offer that solved all of his problems at once, and both the benefits and costs were catching his attention. He then asks why she was so interested in him. The hunter says she saw potential. He then introduces himself to her, and they shake hands. Now he had a feeling that they could help each other. As the saying goes, one hand washes the other. The next day, during a call with his new teacher, he asks if something had happened since they had a new supervisor at the company. The day before, they had a conversation, and he had asked her for a favor. This favor consisted of her telling the company he worked for that he didn't like his supervisor and couldn't trust him. Now he couldn't believe they had fired him so easily after she had just mentioned it briefly. Then the two of them meet at the Dream Hunter Academy. When they arrive, his teacher hands him a temporary license, saying that she had made it yesterday. He was starting to get worried about this, but she had actually kept her word. He might not be a professional hunter yet, but this felt like his first real step. He then asks her how to join a dungeon mission. She says there's no need to explain, and instead, she will show him how it's done. She tells him to pick any weapon he likes and presents 3 different types of spears. Now the two of them are inside a dungeon. When he kills a monster, he asks her why she was following him since he thought she had said she would leave him alone. She replies that since he was her only student, she couldn't just leave him alone on his first mission. She asks him to think of it as elite student mentorship, and he responds that it's an honor, which isn't exactly wrong. She continues, saying that since this was his first mission, he should take extra precautions. But usually in these low-level dungeons, there were only monsters called kobolds. Still, he needed to stay on guard. Kobolds are classified as 2-star monsters, making this the perfect place for a rookie to explore and gain some practical experience. Normally, physical attacks are blocked by the magical shields these monsters have. One of these monsters leaps for the protagonist. His teacher warns him just before it happens, and he dodges it easily. Then he rushes toward the monster and kills it in a single attack. The protagonist is thrilled to realize that this was making his daily training from the course's progress at a much faster rate than before. He also remembers that even so, he could still make money from these dungeon missions. He'd literally be winning on all fronts. The protagonist then tells his teacher that they needed to speed things up. What he was doing felt like gaining experience in a game, and he proceeds to eliminate every monster he sees along the way. Park already knew that her student was a bit strange from the beginning, but the fact that he was always looking at a phone with the screen turned off during his free time was on a whole other level of weird. He always tried to justify it by asking if she couldn't see what was on his phone, that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was that, without even the most basic proper training, he was already killing kobolds like a veteran hunter with 10 years of experience. Another thing that made her a bit unnerved about him was his habit of holding the monster carcasses after killing them and using them as weights for his exercises. It wouldn't take long before her grandfather noticed that she had a new student, and when he saw the state this one was in, she couldn't even imagine what he would say. The next day, the protagonist was happy to have made 9,510,000 wons in just one day by processing the monsters he had killed at the company he worked for. However, it probably took up a lot of his time, so much so that he hadn't even finished the lessons from the previous day. He then considers asking his coworker to do the work for him. Not only was he reliable, but it would also be good to stay in contact with him. And with that money, he could even start his own company. He decides to call them when he gets the chance. Now that he finally had money, he started thinking about how to spend it. He wondered whether he should save it or find the best use for it. Doing missions and making money at the same time was good, but the progress in his course wasn't going as expected. There must be a faster way to become stronger, as strong as the Monkey King. Stokie decided to return to his course, but got a huge shock when he saw that the price had increased to 27 billion wons. This was way beyond the fortune of any professional hunter. He then decided to focus on other priorities first. While he was training at his new hunter academy, his teacher told him about a tournament for academies and was surprised to realize he had never heard of it. This competition was a way to measure how far the students from each academy could go. She then offered him the registration papers and said he should think of it as a training opportunity. There were many types of competitions like this, and the Academy tournament was considered part of Division 4. If he did well in this tournament, he would have a chance to advance to higher divisions, and it would also elevate the Academy's official recognition. The teacher told him she wanted him to represent the Dream Academy in this tournament. If the Academy participated, his course would progress significantly. The protagonist accepted, believing it was a great way to gain more experience. She was happy he accepted, and he commented that this was part of their agreement. He asked her what the tournament was like. She replied that the exact details hadn't been released yet, but the scoring system would be a combination of dungeon missions and individual combat between competitors. Sounds like an interesting competition to watch. When the protagonist heard this, he stopped to think. The only battles he had fought were against monsters, and he had never faced another student. He started thinking that if he was going to compete, he would do it the right way, but didn't know where to find a training partner. He then looked at his teacher and asked if she would like to be his partner during training. This was a good opportunity since Park was a Class B hunter, and on top of that, she had been trained by the famous Sword Star. He didn't know how to duel yet, but he was eager to find out how strong she really was. The two of them then began training. During the sword duel training, he charged straight at her, something obvious to her, and she easily dodged. He was fast, but his footwork was poor. He attacked solely with his eyes. What she had seen in the dungeon was impressive for sure, but a student was still a student. She didn't know what he was trying to do with those kinds of attacks, but it was time to end it. When she launched a magical attack at him, he managed to block it. This impressed her since his weapon should have flown out of his hand after that attack. They then returned to their starting positions, and he said it was his turn to attack. Something strange was happening during the training. The protagonist's attacks had become stronger and faster, as though he had turned into a completely different fighter. It was revealed that he was simply remembering the lessons from the course he had taken that taught him how to use a spear. The instructor would tell him to make his attacks obvious in order to make his opponent overconfident, leading them to create a predictable defense. Once that defense was weakened, he would need to spin his spear to break the remainder of his opponent's guard, and once exposed, finish with a direct attack. Following all these steps, the protagonist made it to the finishing move, but his teacher took it a little too seriously and attacked him with full force, sending him crashing into the wall and knocking him out. When the protagonist got up, he started laughing, saying it felt like he had lost. Hearing this, his teacher was surprised that he thought he could win against her. There was still a huge gap between him and a professional, and it would take time to bridge that gap, at least theoretically. He then started assessing his progress from the free Transcendence courses at the academy and asked his teacher if they had some free time before the tournament. He suggested they train while also doing dungeon missions, commenting that training with her had been very useful. His teacher still thought he was a little strange, but at least he was gaining experience, so she accepted the proposal. She also mentioned that if he won the tournament, the prize money would be all his. The protagonist was surprised to learn there was a cash prize. His teacher continued, saying the total prize amount was 100 million wons, which was the exact price of a spear he wanted to buy at the Transcendence Academy. The protagonist called her Madam, said he would do his best, and asked when the tournament would be. This surprised her, and she responded that it would be in about 2 weeks. He became excited and said he needed to train, asking if she had any weights lying around. He began picking up various items, inspecting them, and even lifted a giant concrete block, which left his teacher even more stunned. A completely understandable reaction. 2 weeks later, the day of the tournament arrived. Many students from different hunter academies had gathered there. A very nerdy-looking boy showed up to participate, and in the middle of the crowd, he started saying that awakened people were very common, but it was still rare to see hunters battle each other. He bet there were many hunters from different fields there, which made some of the people listening feel a bit uncomfortable. The boy was then directed to his waiting room, and when he entered, there were many people inside, which made him nervous and unsure of what to do. They had extremely expensive and elegant weapons, and everyone seemed confident. It was then that, amidst all these people, he noticed the protagonist, who was wearing pirate clothes and carrying a cheap weapon. The boy began to question what kind of academy the protagonist was from and why he was staring at a turned-off cell phone screen. The boy started thinking that the protagonist must have been acting just like him, pretending to fiddle with his phone in a new place, like a newbie at school trying not to attract attention. In a way, they were both the same. It's interesting to see a shy person interact like that. The nerd gathered some courage and walked over to speak to the protagonist. He greeted him and asked if he was there to compete, introducing himself as Mingy Lee. The protagonist gave his name in return, and then Mingy asked if he could sit near him. As he settled down, he started commenting on the people around them. He pointed out an argument between a student from the Quail Academy named Jang and a student from the Mint Academy named Chiolman Lee. Mingy explained that Chiolman had a unique fighting style using 2 daggers. The argument was interrupted when another student, frustrated by the noise, spoke up. Mingy explained to the protagonist that this was Jungwon Lee, a #1 student from the Revenant Academy and probably the favorite to win the tournament. He also mentioned a rumor that Jungwon had been recruited by the granddaughter of the famed Star of the Sword, but had refused the offer. Then an announcement came that the first round would begin shortly and all candidates were asked to prepare. The protagonist stood up and remembered that he had spent the past 2 weeks trying to reach 30% of the courses he was taking. It wasn't as if the numbers alone made him stronger instantly, but he could feel the difference with every step he took. The others there might have more experience, but he was closing his gaps, and now he felt ready to face any monster and any opponent. The first round was a dungeon labyrinth, which took the protagonist by surprise. The objective was not to fight other students, but to escape. It was a test to see how well the students could navigate through the maze's challenges. Defeating monsters might offer clues on how to escape, so it was essentially a test of skills dealing with the dungeon. The audience watching everything unfold was surprised by the students' performance. Among them was the protagonist's teacher, who had disguised herself to observe without being noticed. Being known is not easy, huh? The protagonist walked through the maze following a popular saying, "Anyone who keeps their hand on the wall of a maze will eventually find the exit." When he reached a fork in the path, he decided to go left, but something felt off, as if something was telling him to go right. He wondered if this was the sixth sense that Chiron had mentioned earlier and decided to trust his instincts. As he followed the path, the announcements revealed that everyone was battling different monsters. He wondered why he hadn't encountered any monsters yet, and then realized that it was likely his instincts protecting him. That's when the nerd from the waiting room appeared and joined him, warning him be careful, as monsters could be anywhere. At least he was trying to help. Minnie commented that the protagonist was moving with great certainty and asked if he knew something he hadn't discovered yet. The protagonist denied, saying he was just following his instincts. Minnie was shocked to learn that he didn't have a plan and then suggested that if the protagonist kept one hand on the wall, he'd easily find the exit. Kim asked why he was following him, and Minnie answered that they were the same type of person, suggesting that it would be smarter for the weaker ones to stick together. The protagonist was shocked by the statement and began to question the impression his sloppy appearance was giving. He started thinking about whether he should keep this kid close to him. The kid talked a lot, but his explanations might be useful at some point. He then asked why he was alone, seeing that he had a family. The kid responded that his parents were dead, and all that was left was him and his sister, saying that brought up many memories of Kim's past. The nerd, realizing he had made the atmosphere uncomfortable, reassured him, saying it was fine since it had happened a long time ago and his sister was too young to walk with him. The protagonist then said that they really were the same type of person and that they could stay together, but the first money would be his alone, and after this round, there would be no more alliance. While they were walking through the maze, the kid was extremely surprised by the confidence the protagonist had in choosing paths and moving forward. When they reached a dead end, Kim placed his hand on the wall, releasing a secret passage. It was then announced that the first candidate had escaped the maze, and it was the protagonist who set a new record of 27 minutes, while the previous record was 1 hour. Are you enjoying the story so far? Then leave a like to show support and comment on what you think. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next stories, which are also awesome. Everyone in the audience was extremely surprised by the new record the protagonist had set by finishing first, and the first question they asked was which academy he was from. Kin was now in the waiting room when Jungwon came over to him, but when the protagonist looked at him, he turned around. Then an instructor entered the room and announced that the second round would be a one-on-one tournament, and since it was a competition in the 4th division, magic weapons were prohibited, but magical boosts were allowed. The professor was walking discreetly through the stands until she managed to find the supposed key to the competition for the next round. She then began to pay attention to the men making their bets when a mysterious figure, cloaked, appeared, betting 1 billion wons on the protagonist, an amount highly unusual for a rookie. In the waiting room, one of the students, upon learning that the competition would be one-on-one, stood up and withdrew. The protagonist didn't quite understand why he did that, but his friend explained that it was common because people from smaller academies believed that these tournaments were always won by someone from the big ones. According to rumors, the participants from the major academies this year didn't hold back in a fight, so it wasn't worth it to seriously injure themselves in a 4th division tournament. Along with the student who gave up, many others followed suit, and soon only 5 participants were left in the room. The first match was the protagonist against Jang, the second was Jungwon against Mingi, and Cheolman advanced by default. The protagonist began to reassure his friend, who was very nervous about the upcoming fights. He then told the kid that there was no reason to think about losing when he hadn't even fought yet. The nerd responded that it was almost certain he would lose. Kim then suggested that he should just give up, but he refused, saying he couldn't do that. The first round was about to begin, and as the protagonist was leaving, he told his friend to either give up or give his all. The kid then grabbed his arm and asked if he wasn't worried. Kim shook his head, saying that he was just thinking about the amount of experience he would gain by leaving there. Thinking about the future sometimes helps prevent headaches. The announcer of the tournament then said that the second round was about to begin and mentioned that the new record for the dungeon maze had been broken. He wondered if it was pure luck or skill, and then introduced the mysterious rookie Seojin Kim. His opponent was known as the Axe Giant from Quail Academy, Dakyul Jang, and the match finally began. Jang started by charging toward the protagonist, claiming that he would show him a new place to put his luck. Meanwhile, his friend was in the waiting room, thinking about his upcoming fight, questioning how he had never fought before. He then remembered Kim's words. Mingi then said that the problem wasn't just his current opponent, but also the other two who were from very famous academies. Someone like him and the protagonist wouldn't stand a chance against them. That's when everyone in the room was surprised, and Mingi's eyes lit up as he looked at the television. The announcer announced that in just a few seconds they already had a winner, Sujin Kim from Dream Academy. In the waiting room, Mingi stood up from his chair, stared at his opponent, and said he was ready. Now it's going to get interesting. The fight between the two consisted of Kim dodging his opponent's heavy attacks and then finishing him off by blocking the axe with his spear, disarming and defeating him. As the protagonist left the arena, he felt disappointed to see that only a few points of progress had been added to his courses from that fight. Now there were only 52 days left until his pass expired, and then he arrived at the waiting room, where his friend ran toward him, completely excited, saying he had watched the fight and commenting that he had no idea how strong he was. However, Kim said that he never said he was weak. Round 2 was ready to begin, and the instructor went to call the participants, Mingi and Jungwon. The protagonist's friend, before leaving, said that there was something about him that he felt, a kind of friendship. After seeing him win the first match, he was happy too. Things had never gone his way, and he didn't have the skills or strength that the protagonist had, but he wanted to be someone his younger sister could look up to. He then ran out of the room to the fight. He has a noble reason to fight. Now the two were in the arena. Mingi started getting nervous because of the number of people watching him. His opponent looked at him with disdain and asked if he wasn't going to shut his mouth. In his mind, everything about Mingi was pathetic, and the fact that he was taking part in this tournament against his will was also pathetic. His opponent was a complete baby. You could tell just by looking at him. It was like a prey about to be devoured. He continued thinking about Mingi, but the kid took a deep breath, got into his fighting stance, and looked him straight in the eyes. The fight began. His opponent charged at him with a direct attack using his sword. Mingi was managing to block all of his attacks. His opponent then said that insects like him should know their place and landed a blow to his stomach. When everyone thought he wouldn't get up from the ground, he remembered what the protagonist had said and struggled to get up, charging at his opponent again. However, he fell again, but this time he managed to cut his opponent's face. When he noticed the audience mocking him for getting hit by someone so weak, he declared to the referee that he had lost and then kneed Mingi in the head, who was already down. He started saying that it was an insult to his person to be in such a low tournament in the last division. The referee tried to interrupt him, telling him to stop or he would be disqualified. He then said that he had already declared his loss, put his foot on Mingi's head, and pointed his sword at his neck. Just as he was about to do something, the protagonist interrupted, defending the strike with his spear. Looking at him, he said he had been saving this for the end and claimed that he couldn't wait any longer to teach him a lesson. The protagonist then told him to take his foot off his friend's head. He challenged him by asking what would happen if he didn't. Kim then attacked him with his spear, knocking off his shoe and forcing him to dodge. While helping Mingi, the protagonist told him that something bad must have happened in his life for him to think it was okay to just step on people. Jungwon questioned if he hadn't understood that they didn't belong in that place and his presence there was an insult. The protagonist replied that they had just as much right as him to be there, but Jungwon responded by questioning if he thought everything in life was fair. Typical rich kid. The audience began to question why the judges weren't intervening. In a conversation the judges were having, one of them said that it didn't make sense, but they had to follow the orders of their superiors, who had instructed them not to interfere. Behind them, overhearing the conversation, was the mysterious figure who had bet a large sum of money on the protagonist. Jungwon continued questioning if Kim understood how the world worked, claiming that there were different places for everyone, and if someone like him got in his way, he would simply crush them, and that was the natural order. In fact, the protagonist used to think the same way. For 9 long years, he had been preparing to become a professional hunter, just dealing with heavy loads, running out of money, and having nothing no matter how hard he tried. His only motivation to stay on his feet was believing in his possible dream. He then asked the referee to take care of Mingi and stood up, claiming that he didn't care about where he was and charged at Jungwon again. This time his attack was blocked and he was countered. The two began to fight on equal footing. The game is now leveled. The protagonist was certain he was going to win his previous fight, even before entering, but this time it felt different. However, he couldn't afford to think about it. He didn't have time to waste worrying. He then started following his instincts, landing a blow to Jungwon's stomach. His opponent then charged at him again, and Kim was managing to block all of his attacks, but it seemed like he was getting stronger with every strike he blocked. Eventually, both of them hit each other at the same time, which greatly affected Jungwon's ego, causing him to release the magic that was stored in his sword. There was no way for the protagonist to stop that without magical defense. The security guards started running toward them, shouting at them to stop, but all Jungwon wanted to do was kill him. Kim then began to remember the lessons he had learned in his courses. Shang Yu was the professor who appeared in his mind to advise him at that moment, saying that the sound the enemy was emitting was filling his ears. It was a trace of hope surrounded by the enemy on all sides. One of his students had asked him why he had entered the battlefield alone if the fight was already lost. He was right. It was over, and there was no way out. It was the first time he had truly felt fear, knowing he would be defeated, yet he still fought. Why? Because he had to fight. And finally, he told Kim that if everything was lost, he would have to attack with everything he had. It was at that moment that the protagonist became the conqueror. He finally reached a milestone in his abilities. Magic began to flow from his spear, and the weapons of both collided, causing a massive explosion that sent the people around them flying. As they wondered who had won, the protagonist was standing and Jungwon was lying on the ground, unconscious. The crowd went wild with the protagonist's victory and started chanting his name in celebration. His teacher was extremely surprised, as just 2 weeks ago, he had trouble handling a simple attack from a magical sword, and now he had managed to defeat one of the strongest magical sword attacks. She then noticed the mysterious figure in the stands, and when she looked at him, she realized he was also incredibly surprised by what had happened. When she blinked, the mysterious man had simply vanished without a trace. The protagonist walked down the street looking shaken by what had happened. He was disqualified for interfering in the match, as it was considered a clear violation of the rules. While he wasn't wrong, he was questioned about what would happen to Jungwon. The judge said that Jungwon would definitely also be disqualified, as the use of magic with the sword meant he intended to kill. He could avoid some penalties, but he would be banned from the professional hunter exams for 5 years. The podium of the tournament had been established. Chiolman in first place, Mingyi in second, and Jang finished in third. At least the protagonist's progress in his courses had increased significantly, especially after winning the fight. He managed a 20% increase in his course with Xiang Yu, now having a progress rate of 56.9%. After much effort, it finally shows that he's advanced. As he walked, his teacher appeared behind him and called his attention. She asked how he was and if he had been hurt. He said he was fine and then apologized to her. She questioned why he was apologizing, and he replied that he could have won, but since he intervened in the fight, he was disqualified. She told him there was no need to apologize and asked again if he was okay. When he asked why she insisted so much, she said it seemed like he really wanted to win that prize money, which made him remember the amount he had lost, leaving him even more shaken. His teacher asked what he was planning to do with the money. He answered that there was a weapon he had been eyeing, but it was fine. He was obviously disappointed, but he would have regretted it more if he hadn't interfered in that fight. Their conversation was interrupted by Mingyi, who ran toward them. When he got close, the boy said he hoped to be like Kim someday. The protagonist said that it was more possible than Mingyi expected. At least the guy is humble. To be honest, Mingyi just didn't have what it took to be a professional hunter at such a young age. But of course, nothing was impossible if he tried hard enough. The protagonist then told him there were many things he could be good at, since he was young and shouldn't be discouraged. Mingyi agreed and apologized for killing the move, saying he just wanted to say goodbye. He thanked the protagonist for everything and left. As he walked away, the protagonist warned him not to listen to other people's opinions about what he could or couldn't do, including his own. He said that the lack of skills was a fact, and people would say he couldn't make anything happen, but he should remember that it was his life to live, not anyone else's. If he wanted to do something, he should just do it. Mingyi walked away, crying and moved after hearing this. When the boy left, his teacher said he was full of surprises. He felt embarrassed, and she continued, saying that she thought he had gained a new fan. He then commented that they needed more students, not fans. The teacher realized she should have mentioned the Dream Academy to the boy. She noticed he had referred to both of them earlier as if he were actually part of her academy, which made her happy. She then offered to buy the weapon he wanted, and he was surprised. She claimed he should think of it as a scholarship. A pretty generous scholarship, by the way. In a house full of security, one of them asked if the master was in a room. The other confirmed, but said that he couldn't be interrupted during his meditation. However, it was urgent, and with all due respect, he entered the room. Munchul Seo, the assistant to the Sword Star, entered the room. His boss said he had made it clear that he didn't want to be disturbed and questioned if he was disobeying him. The aura around him was so strong that it made the assistant unable to move properly. However, he said it was about his granddaughter, who had participated in the academy tournament. This caught the boss's attention, and he asked for more details. The assistant then said they were still trying to gather more information, but it was clear that she had gained a new student. He asked if the boss wanted him to handle it, but Minchul Park declined, saying he would deal with it himself and would find out who this student was. The protagonist and his teacher had just returned from a weapons shop, and now he was training with her at the academy. As he completed his daily training list, he could feel that she was almost drilling a hole into his head just by staring at him. He then asked what had happened. She questioned his earlier idea, saying he had been excited about getting a new weapon, and when they went to the shop, he decided not to buy any of them. He replied that he just didn't want to let her down. She responded that it really didn't seem like something he would say. Kim just couldn't get those transcendental weapons out of his head, but that stupid system calculator had increased the price again. When he was about to ask her for the money to buy the spear, the price went up instantly. Brazilian-level taxation right here. She then, irritated, apologized, saying she tried to do something for him and would make that mistake again. She then asked him what kind of magic he was using. He didn't quite understand the question, so she explained that from seeing him in dungeon missions and at the tournament, it was clear he knew about magic, but had never used it in front of her before. The fact was, he still hadn't learned any magic. The forms of magic were techniques on how to use it. Everyone had their own method, and at all hunter academies, the teachers taught magical forms based on their own teaching methods. This was one of the reasons he was saving money to attend a famous academy. The protagonist then asked her if she taught the Sword Star's magical form, and she denied, saying it was strictly forbidden. However, she could teach magical forms she had created. He was surprised to learn she had created her own. His teacher said she had always been interested in teaching methods. She then noticed he was distracted and decided to leave, saying she would let him train. He asked where she was going, and she replied that she had many things to do. He jokingly doubted she was busy, which irritated her, and she told him to stay on guard there. He accepted the mission and now had to decide which course he would take next at the Transcendent Academy. At times like this, he missed his mentor who had disappeared without a trace, that little ghost of a human. What is magic? There are strict rules of cause and effect that control the world. Even so, there are methods that exist to bypass these rules, and this is magic. The protagonist then chooses a magic course where the instructor is Merlin. When he sees the old professor, he thinks it would be similar to the Buddha course. However, Merlin suddenly says that he had finished explaining and tells the protagonist to do it on his own. A new message appears saying that the protagonist now has a new daily training to manifest 1,000 magic spheres. He attempts to do this by focusing on his hands. Magic is about connecting the real world with the world of imagination. What you see before your eyes reflects in the world, the incredible power of something that comes from nothing, the manifestation of one's own magic, the famous aura. Upon hearing these words, the protagonist understands what Merlin meant and recalls what his teacher, Chiron, had told him about adapting to all possibilities. He then finally manages to create a magic sphere, but it's so small that it motivates him to try to do better. It was then that, during his training, his teacher's grandfather unexpectedly enters the academy. The Sword Star, upon seeing the protagonist, remembers that he had come to see which much talked about student this was. And there he was casually standing with what was clearly a magic sphere. It seemed weak, but a normal student like him really couldn't do something so remarkable. Someone like him attending this academy can only have one reason, to take advantage of his granddaughter. Her grandfather then asks what he's doing there. The protagonist introduces himself, saying it's an honor to meet him personally, and tells him that if he came to see Suyin, she had just left. Upon hearing this, the old man is surprised that he referred to his granddaughter by name and then asks how he's resisting the aura he's sending, claiming that only S-class hunters can stand with it. He then demands to know the truth and asks why he's here. The protagonist is confused and asks what he's talking about. The old man claims he has the ability to go anywhere and asks why he came to his granddaughter's academy. He then charges toward him, demanding he speak the truth. Kim, when trying to explain, dodges an attack the old man sends his way. No ceremony at all. His teacher had just arrived at the Sword Star's house, and a maid told her that he had just left. Back at the academy, her grandfather was still pressuring the protagonist, demanding he tell the truth about why he was there. Suyin, still at her grandfather's house, encounters one of his assistants and asks where her grandfather went. He replies that her master had just left to visit her academy, and she runs out of the house in a hurry. The protagonist is wondering what's going on now and is shocked to realize that these strong attacks he's been dodging are coming from a sword still sheathed. But at least that means he's not trying to kill him. The old man then asks what kind of game he's playing, and the protagonist responds that he's misunderstood what's going on. The old man claims that a simple student manifesting magic and casually avoiding his attacks is suspicious and starts attacking him again, asking if he thinks he's an idiot. The protagonist says he doesn't know what he's heard and asks him to listen, but the old man refuses and continues to attack. Kim, instead of being scared, knows he would lose in a fight against him, but the idea of seeing how much he's evolved excites him to fight. The teacher's grandfather, seeing the protagonist's eyes, claims that something has changed. In his decades as a hunter, no one had ever looked him in the eyes like that, and he calls him formidable. He asks again what he wants with his granddaughter and charges toward him. The protagonist managed to avoid the old man's attacks but couldn't land any of his own. Every attack was beyond his ability to understand, and he questioned how long he could hold up. As he resisted another series of attacks, he charged forward, but the old man sent him flying with just one strike, calling him insignificant and demanding he answer his question to end it. Short and to the point, this old man. While falling, the protagonist refused to accept defeat, claiming he could do more. Tricks wouldn't work and he shouldn't have a chance while the old man was holding back against him. He then stood up, ready to take his one chance to finish him. As he dodged the attacks again, Merlin appeared in his mind, telling him to look beyond his head and connect magic to the real world. His spear was then completely imbued with magic, and he attacked with all he had, but again, it was unsuccessful. When he was on his knees, the old man said that he had finally shown his true side. The protagonist tried to explain that he was just trying to defend himself, but upon mentioning his teacher's name again, the old man grew angry at the lack of respect. Her grandfather claimed it seemed like the protagonist had a death wish and he could grant it. Before anything worse could happen, his teacher finally arrived at the academy and interrupted them. When she arrived, she asked the protagonist if he was all right. Her grandfather then said that a real man wouldn't be bothered by a few scratches like that. Kim responded that a real man would be more reasonable to deal with, and hearing this, the old man charged at him again, but his granddaughter appeared and ordered him to stop attacking her student. "Mommy's here." The teacher apologized to the protagonist for putting him in the middle of this. He responded that it was fine and that she didn't need to apologize for him. But she said she'd explain later and apologized again. Realizing what was going on, he left so they could talk alone. Her grandfather said he had been waiting for the opportunity to tell her that the boy was very suspicious and that she should stay away from him. She denied it, and he asked how she could even know. For 31 years, she had heard this same question from him. Her grandfather never listened to her, not even once. The failure of his Hunter Academy was also because of him, as he always went too hard on the students who showed up, making it clear that all of them would leave. She knew why he acted that way, but this time was different. Her grandfather continued, telling her to get rid of him tomorrow, and if she couldn't, he would do it himself. But she interrupted him, saying she wouldn't do that, shouting that she didn't want to do it and had no reason to listen to him. She claimed the academy was hers, not his, and vented everything out. A complete outburst. They argued a lot about Kim. Her grandfather claimed she didn't know anything about him. As a final plea, she said that she didn't know, but she would find out for herself. She added that she couldn't live in his shadow forever and didn't want to. She was tired of it. Seeing his reaction, she apologized for speaking so much but told him that this time she wouldn't listen to him. Her grandfather, now standing there, thought to himself that she had never raised her voice to him like that before. He then remembered the day her son had died in an incident in a dungeon. That day, Suyeon's parents had died and she was left with him to take care of her. He promised himself that he would make her strong enough to stand on her own. He would give her all the love he could, and she would learn to use his sword, no matter what. Their past discussion about her becoming a teacher, something he didn't want, had pushed them apart a bit, and now the result was that she wouldn't listen to him anymore. The protagonist was looking out the street and remembered the previous day, the encounter with her grandfather and his teacher. He thought he wouldn't survive it. The old man had been holding back, but if she hadn't interrupted, he didn't know what would have happened. Last night, Suyeon called and explained everything she could. Her situation, her relationship with her grandfather, and what happened with her former students. She didn't tell him everything, but at least he got an idea of what she was going through, since it was probably years of history. When he entered the academy, he encountered her grandfather again and froze at the door. The old man told him not to stand there and ordered him to come in and sit in front of him. This time, Kim managed to explain everything that had happened between them and the agreement they had made. The old man asked if that was all and questioned whether he was hiding something. The protagonist confessed that it was everything and that there was nothing to hide. The old man thought to himself that the protagonist didn't seem to be lying, but his latent strength and power didn't make sense for an ordinary student. The protagonist then asked for permission to start his daily training, and the old man gave his consent but said he would stay and watch. One thing he could be sure of, there was something off about that kid. He kept staring at the screen of his turned-off cell phone. The old man then asked if he was meditating, saying meditation was important but should be done in moderation, and that all discipline was in the mind. Kim ignored him. Realizing this, the old man said he could teach him some moves, and that's how he got his attention. However, the protagonist said he didn't need it and thanked him, adding an apology, explaining that the old man was breaking his concentration and asking if they could talk later, completely breaking his posture. The teacher arrived at the academy and asked what her grandfather was doing there. He then began asking her why she was rejecting his teachings and showing no interest. Everything about him seemed strange. However, she said that he had always been like this, and he was shocked to realize that she was acting as if it was normal. She said she had already known he would think like that, as she had done the same before. "I'm not judging. The kid is exotic." The old man, observing them from afar, noticed that his granddaughter always listened to every word he said with a smile. He began to question if he had ever seen her this happy before, which made him feel jealous. But before he could react, his assistant entered the academy with an urgent message. The Order of Truth had summoned him. He ignored it, saying if it were important, they would have come to him. The assistant then said it was Dame Kalia who had requested it personally, and she also asked for Kim to go with him. The Order of Truth, especially the 7 apostles, held some of the highest positions in the nation. Dame Kalia was set to be the next apostle of purity, and if someone like her called the protagonist, he should accept no matter what. The protagonist tried to refuse the request as he didn't know her. That's when the assistant said she was incredible. Everyone asked why he said that, and he responded because she had already predicted he would reject the invitation and made an offer for if that happened. If he just showed up, she would give him 100 million wons. The protagonist was taken by surprise and wondered how she knew the exact amount of money he wanted. It was a pretty precise guess. The Order of Truth, a religious group that literally only works with the truth, is led by a mysterious man known as the Exalted Voice and his 7 apostles. Their words are the truth and also the word of God. 100 years ago, this order was nothing more than a cult. During the era known as the Great Cataclysm, countless heroes joined forces with theirs and their influence grew with them, bringing peace to humanity, especially after they defeated the terrible Berserk, the monster that appeared in the final days of the Great Cataclysm. It was so terrifyingly strong that all the world's heroes combined couldn't defeat it. It was so dreadful that its arrival was marked as the Second Great Cataclysm until it was finally defeated by the Exalted Voice and his 7 apostles. Now, the 2 of them were at the headquarters of the Order of Truth, going to meet Dame Kalia. The protagonist spent the entire journey questioning why they were interested in him. Then they had to wait for her in a specific place, and the old man said he had known this would happen. The protagonist asks him if they were close, suggesting that he must know her. He replies that this was the first time he was seeing her as well. He continues by saying that they had been in contact a few times, but never personally. The protagonist then asks about the Exalted Voice, since the only time he had appeared was during the battle against the Berserk. The old man says that he had only seen him from a distance during the Great Cataclysm. Finally, Kalia appears, and the old man asks her why she had summoned him and made them wait. She introduces herself to the protagonist, saying that she was a believer in forgiveness and the Order of Truth, and her duty was to spread the word of God and walk the path of purity. The protagonist was about to introduce himself as well, but she interrupted, already stating her name and thanking him for coming. He then asks her how she wants to get to know him, and she says that she would let any misunderstandings be resolved before continuing. She then mentions that he had participated in the Academy's tournament recently, and one of its members had seen him there and spoke so highly of him that she was eager to meet him. Networking by beating a rich kid, basically. Then the conversation between the 3 begins, and she claims she needed them to investigate a particular dungeon. When the old man was about to ask what he would do there, she answered that he knew better than anyone that it wasn't over yet. The protagonist asks what they were talking about, and she replies that an anomaly had been found in a dungeon in Korea, and he knew what that meant. That had been the reason she had gone to Korea. She continues, saying she had made some offers to them, even considering that the old man didn't want anything. She then mentions that she had heard about his granddaughter running a hunter academy, and when she tried to offer help, he released his aura and threatened not to get his granddaughter involved in this again. She apologized, saying it was rude of her, and he stopped releasing his aura. She then says she didn't have much to offer him, but suggests that in the future he could ask for any favor. He agrees, and they shake hands, sealing the deal. She then turns to the protagonist and says that her offer to him is for the Order of Truth to sponsor him. He replies that he was already affiliated with an academy. She says that he didn't need to leave and that he would eventually discover that there are things an academy can't afford, but the Order can. He then asks what he would have to do in return. She replies that there were no conditions and that she simply wanted to start a relationship with him. He says that honestly he's still not convinced, but if she answers one of his questions truthfully, he would consider it. A great method of trying to learn more about the academy. As he was about to ask her about the Transcendent Academy, he interrupts himself, realizing there was no reason to ask that now. He wouldn't be able to tell if she was being honest or not, but somehow he had to test her. So in a quick motion, he takes his phone from his pocket, shows her the screen, and asks what she sees. It seemed like she could see what he was seeing too, but she responds that the screen was black and asks if that answered his question. She then asks again if he wanted her sponsorship. The protagonist declines, saying he wasn't interested. After everyone left, she was now talking to the same guy who had been observing the protagonist during the tournament. Meanwhile, as the protagonist and his teacher's grandfather were leaving, the old man asks him why he refused the offer. He responds that it had bothered him. The old man asks why it bothered him and not his agreement with his granddaughter. He answers that Subin was more honest than her. He then asked the old man what an anomaly in a dungeon was. After all, he couldn't let this pass by. The old man explains that a dungeon anomaly occurs when the magical shield surrounding it distorts. If the waves of this magical shield start to mix, it completely changes the dungeon. These distortions have a high number of effects and can impact the dungeon's level or even cause a rift to appear. The protagonist exclaims that this wasn't possible. The old man replies that he didn't see it in modern times, but it was very common during the Great Cataclysm. Kim then talks about what Callie had tried to say, but the old man interrupts, saying that he didn't need to worry and that she was wrong about the return of the Great Cataclysm. Realizing they were getting further apart, the protagonist asks the old man where he was going. He responds politely that it wasn't his concern, then adds that he would leave him with his granddaughter. But if he tried anything funny, he would come back. Kim then asks him if this meant he was gaining points with him. The old man replies that it only meant he was keeping an eye on him. The protagonist then says that he wasn't being honest about his feelings, and that was what distanced him from his granddaughter. Realizing this had irritated the old man, he quickly runs off and says his goodbyes. Having a conversation with that man was indeed difficult for the protagonist. He then returns to the academy and is greeted by his teacher, who asks where her grandfather was, saying she thought he would come with him. He apologizes again, saying he forgot to mention that he was a difficult person to deal with at times. While there was a sort of tension between the two, she interrupts, asking if he needed money. He affirms and asks how she knew that. She replies that she had just overheard him complaining about it several times. She then says she did some research while he was gone and thinks she found something for him. She then presents the competition to complete a dungeon. An interesting competition. The competition she presented to him had a reward of 300 million wons, which was more than enough to motivate him to win. She goes on to say that there were many dungeons that needed to be explored, and they could be cleared with the level of students. And there were more than enough students to do this. She asserts that he could easily win this. Since it involved dungeon missions, he would also be able to increase his course progress, making it a double win for him. He then accepts the invitation, and she replies that she knew he would be interested and that he should register tomorrow. She knew exactly what he needed without even asking and had clearly done a lot of research to find this for him. In any case, it was a competition and anything could happen, so he would have to take it seriously. The protagonist asks her what the rules of the competition were. She responds that it would last for a week, and at the beginning, the government would reveal the designated dungeons. Then the participants would reserve the dungeon they wanted to complete the mission. To reserve a dungeon, it had to be done 10 hours in advance, and you could only reserve ahead of time. Everything is based on completing the dungeons as quickly as possible. The key is speed, fast-paced. A few days later, the competition day arrived. The protagonist had already seen good results in his courses from his hard work, significantly increasing his progress level. The highest progress was from Xiaoyu's course, which was now at 61.7%. It was then that he was walking on the street with his teacher when his former co-worker approached him. A few days ago, they had a call, and the protagonist made a proposal for them to work together. The job involved him transporting the monsters out of the competition and also being their driver, claiming he would pay him. His co-worker responds, saying it's not a bad idea, but asks if he's sure it won't be a hindrance. The protagonist thanks him for his concern, but says there's no need to worry about him, and he would indeed be a big help. The competition then started, and the two say goodbye to the teacher and head to the dungeon. His co-worker drives a cargo truck, and they both get in. The protagonist remembers that the key to winning was to clear as many dungeons as they could. He begins to speak about how everything would work out if they were quick. There were two factors to keep in mind: how fast they could complete a mission and how quickly they could get to other dungeons. Most dungeons were only 1 or 2 star levels, so he wasn't worried. His co-worker starts the truck, and they rush to the dungeon. The faster they finish, the better. When they arrive at the dungeon portal, the protagonist enters and they wait outside. However, in less than 10 minutes, he had already finished the mission and called his friend to help take the monsters out of there. His teacher was so surprised by how fast he had finished that she couldn't believe it and entered the dungeon to verify. Upon entering, she found the monster corpses, confirming what he had said. He then starts collecting the bodies with his co-worker and takes them to the truck. His friend asks why he always insists on handling the corpses, and he responds that it was because of his daily training. While his friend dealt with the bodies, he went back into the dungeon to get the remaining ones. They continued like this until they finished. The teacher stood there, wondering what was going on. The two then head to the truck and drive off to the next dungeon. The duo was working at full speed, clearing dungeons ahead. The protagonist would rush into the portal and immediately attack the monsters with everything. He had to kill them as quickly as possible. Once they finished, they repeated the process with the bodies, and after completing the task, they would get back in the truck and leave. The dynamic duo departs at high speed. From the dungeon administration department, they were making reports about the missions the students had completed that day. When reviewing the candidates, They were impressed that everyone had good numbers. They were even more surprised when they saw that one candidate had managed to clear 16 dungeons and was in second place. They were even more shocked when they saw that the first place holder was the protagonist, claiming to have completed 32 dungeon missions. The man who was doing the count calls his supervisor, asking if something was wrong, claiming that it was impossible to do so many in just one day. His supervisor responds that he also thought there was something suspicious, but the person really did arrive with everyone, and it was true. Apparently, he had managed his time between the dungeons with great precision. He had also heard from other supervisors that he had finished each dungeon in under 10 minutes. The man couldn't believe what he was hearing, saying that even though these were low-level dungeons, it would take at least 30 minutes for a student to finish each one. He asked if he's sure it was a student. The supervisor says that he had already checked and found no sign of any anomalies in his name. When asked about the name of the academy he attended, the supervisor responds that it was a small hunter academy called Dream Academy. That's when the man remembered that this was the name of the Hunter Academy managed by the grandmother of the Sword Star. An important detail to remember. The candidate who was in second place was apologizing to her instructor from her Hunter Academy. He told her that her apology wasn't necessary since if she didn't win first place, it would reflect poorly on the academy's name. She says she would work harder to achieve that. However, he said that the first place winner had completed 32 dungeons and questioned if she could do that. It would only be possible if she could finish each dungeon in under 10 minutes, but even with the travel time, that would be impossible. However, he replied that he believed it was possible because if someone else had done it, then there was a chance. He then told her to keep doing what she was doing, and he would take care of the rest. She realized that he was probably just making excuses to vent. Noticing the way she looked at him, he commented that she didn't need to worry so much about it, but she had to keep in mind that the only goal was to win and move forward, and how to do that didn't matter. Then he asked her if she was still thinking about Jinsu. She denied it, and he continued saying that Jinsu was an idiot, and she wasn't, asking her to confirm. She claimed that she wasn't an idiot and called him father. This girl began to remember a conversation she had with Jinsu, where he said that to be a professional hunter, one's heart had to be pure and uncommitted. She replied that no one thought that way anymore, and people became professional hunters just to make money. He then asked if everyone jumped off a bridge, would she jump too? He continued, saying that he would become a professional hunter who inspired others. And that was the story for today. Did you enjoy it? Then make sure to leave a like and comment on which stories you want to see next. I'm always keeping an eye on the comments, and I'll bring the best stories. Don't forget to subscribe, share with your friends who also love manhwa, and see you in the next video. We're in this together.